The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. On behalf of the Neisefeld Professional Development Committee, I'd like to welcome you to Neisefeld's 6th professional webinar for educators for the 2018-19 school year. This evening's webinar is entitled World and Dual Language Programs, One Goal. My name is John Carlino, and I will be hosting this evening's webinar along with Neisefeld President Beth Slocum as our moderator. Our webinar series is free to Neisefeld members through the generous support of the New York State Regional Bilingual Educational Resource Network at NYU. The purpose of this organization is to provide ongoing support to educators of language learners in districts and schools statewide. Neisefeld would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their very generous support of our endeavors. Please note that this webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording will be sent by email afterward. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour with 45 to 50 minutes devoted to the presenters. The remaining time will serve as Q&A with the presenters to answer your questions. Attendees are encouraged to submit questions during the webinar using the question feature of the GoToWebinar control panel on the side of your screen. Our moderator, Beth, will organize these questions and share them with the presenter as relevant and/or at the end. If you're watching this webinar as a registered live participant, you are eligible to receive a certificate of attendance stating that you signed up for and logged into the webinar. In order for us to be able to verify your attendance, you must be logged in with GoToWebinar. If you're calling in on your phone without logging in, your participation will not be recorded. All participants are encouraged to work with their immediate supervisor to determine how best to receive credit for this professional development. In the event of technical difficulties on our end, please remain connected or reconnect to the webinar as you are able. If the technical difficulties are on your end, please contact GoToMeeting customer support for assistance. And now, please let me take this opportunity to introduce you to our presenters, José Medina and Fabrice Jaumont. Dr. Fabrice Jaumont is the author of The Bilingual Revolution, The Future of Education is in Two Languages, which provides practical advice for parents and educators who want to create a dual language program in their own school. The book has been translated in Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Russian, and Spanish. Dr. Jaumont has published several books and articles on philanthropy, higher education, heritage languages, cinema, and the arts. A native of France, Dr. Jaumont moved to the United States in 1997. He is currently Education Attaché for the Embassy of France to the United States, Program Officer for FACE Foundation in New York, founder of the New York in French, and a Senior Fellow at Fondation Maison des Sciences et de l'Homme in Paris. Dr. José Medina is the founder and Chief Educational Advocate for Dr. José Medina Educational Solutions. Prior to establishing this consulting firm, Dr. Medina served as research scientist and director of dual language and bilingual education at the Center for Applied Linguistics in Washington, D.C. Dr. Medina provides dual language technical assistance, professional development, and job-embedded support to dual language programs across the United States and globally. Dr. Medina is a co-author of the third edition and widely used Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education. Fabrice and Jose, thank you for sharing your time with us. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.
De rien. De nada.
So I'm sharing the screen, right? Can everybody see this?
Yep, everyone can see your screen now.
All right, perfect. So Jose and I will discuss this topic, which has been ongoing really, and how can we connect word language education with dual language education, and obviously you'll hear from us. We're not only advocates for dual language and world language education, but we're also a strong believer they're sharing the same goal. Jose, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. For the longest time, dual language and world language programs really have existed separately. And really, Fabrice and I are colleagues that really believe that the two really have so much more in common than differences. And so we're excited to make those connections as we engage in the dialogue this afternoon, this evening, actually.
So the two of us are believers in what Greg Roberts once said, that monolingualism is the illiteracy of the 21st century. And we believe that a paradigm shift is needed in language education in the United States, so that the American approach to education turns from being monolingual, monolithic in a sense, to multilingual and embracing multilingual communities. For that, we need to create environments that will not only embrace our linguistic communities and the cultures of our families, and promote our heritages, our linguistic heritage, cultural heritage, as well as facilitate a dialogue between parents and schools. I think this is a key aspect, that there need to be greater dialogue between these two actors of our society. And all of that, just to say that respecting each other's cultures, each other's linguistic background, is a great way to help bridge the gaps that still divide our society to this day. What we wanted to point out is that multilingual education means different things. Obviously, for many people in this country, this means access to English and the equal opportunity that it creates. And this is very important, particularly in New York City. And yesterday I was with Chancellor Carranza, and this is central to the Chancellor's mission. Equity, 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 the lens of equity has to be central to dual language education. Multilingual education also means that we should sustain our heritage. Families like mine, and I'm a French heritage individual with two young daughters, whom I want them to, not only speak French to myself and my wife, but also speak French to my parents, and create that bond. And sustain that linguistic heritage. So this is important as well. And this is also what multilingual education means. Of course, more and more people think that and believe that there are advantages to being multilingual. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but there are definitely cognitive development advantages in learning several languages as early as possible and as young as possible. For many more families and educators, and if you look at the examples of Utah or North Carolina or Delaware, you hear more this argument that being multilingual is good for business and the professional opportunities that this will create. And this is something to watch, because it's an argument that dominates the discourse on multilingual education. And then simply, being multilingual makes you live a richer life. It's the richness of being able to communicate in several languages. And for that, it's a simple feeling. Monolingual, again, is the illiteracy of the 21st century. And we all want a multilingual society. And we want everyone to have access to multilingualism, to languages and cultures. Jose.
Yeah, thank you, Fabrice. One thing that I love that Fabrice began really addressing is the fact that in all other parts of the world, multilingualism is the norm. And it's interesting that somehow here in the United States, it's one of the places where monolingualism is somehow equating patriotism, which is it doesn't make sense, because one can be multilingual and still be extremely patriotic. So I love that you started that dialogue, Fabrice. One of the things that's really interesting is that Fabrice and I have an opportunity to serve all over the country and internationally, but we had never met before. And so Fabrice and I actually met finally as we were serving and facilitating some professional learning at New York in the New York City Department of Education. And so Fabrice and I finally got a chance to really share with each other and view each other's presentations to make the connections that really there's so much that is the same between world language and dual language. And so I wanted to talk about the 3 goals of dual language education because I think that they fit right alongside what Fabrice was talking about. So bilingualism and biliteracy is really the ultimate goal of any multilingual program. And of course, bilingualism and biliteracy can be multilingualism and multiliteracy. The second thing that we really want our students to be able to accomplish is to have grade level academic achievement in both program languages or in the languages that are targeted in that program. And then the third goal of dual language, which I think Fabrice also began to talk about, is really the idea of sociocultural competence. And so I wanted to make sure that we touched on those 3 goals. As Fabrice, if you don't mind changing the slide so that we could all continue to make those connections together. So bilingualism, of course, is the goal of many programs, but that's not the ultimate goal or what Fabrice and I are talking about, because bilingualism is the ability on a continuum to be able to listen and to speak and obviously understand what is being said. However, in the programs that we're talking about, it really goes beyond that, because what we want is we want our students to be able to read, write, listen, speak, but also to make connections among all of the languages that exist in a student's linguistic repertoire, and to actually use those pieces in that repertoire to strengthen as other languages are added. And so that's the difference. I know that I remember taking a foreign language class many years ago, because I'm a little bit older, although I look super young. Fabrice can attest to that.
Very young, yes.
Very young. I just look so young, right, Fabrice? But I wasn't learning content through the language, and so therefore, I really didn't reach biliteracy or multiliteracy because that wasn't the goal. But in the programs that Fabrice and I are talking about, it really is about all of those connections. So that's goal number 1. For goal number 2, if you could change the slide for me, Fabrice, really it is about those grade level expectations. So it's about ensuring that the students have access to every single grade level standard, regardless of the language proficiency in the language of instruction when those students are participating in those world language immersion programs or the dual language programs. Additionally, it really talks to the fidelity of the language allocation plan for that program, because there are times that that will say that we have a 50-50 program, but we might be actually not giving full information to the stakeholders that we're serving, because 50-50 is not just 50% of the content areas, it's 50% of the entire instructional day, which then means that services in special education, services for intervention, art, music, physical education, those courses, those supports also need to be offered in both program languages, which is something that we often forget. And so when we implement programs, we need to ensure that we really have the systems in place so that we align with the latest research and recommendations. And then finally, goal number 3, I think, is the one that's most often forgotten. One of the things that I loved about seeing Fabrice present and that I found a connection with is that equity and social justice piece, because at the end of the day, we can help students become bilingual and biliterate. We can ensure that they achieve grade level academic success in both program languages. But if students don't engage in conversations about equity, social justice, cultural proficiency from the age of 3 and 4 and 5, then what good does that do? If we have bilingual, biliterate adult citizens who don't empathize, who don't value. And so that's really what this third goal is about, and it's often the forgotten goal. It's about ensuring that every stakeholder really is an advocate for the program. It's one of the things that I love about Fabrice's book, because that parent piece is so important. It's also one of the 7 strands that we address in the guiding principles for dual language education as well. Defending the right to access diverse curriculum is huge, because as we all know, serving in world language and dual language programs, sometimes those resources are limited. But I think that my most favorite one, the one that I always like to talk about, is that third bullet. The fact that often we can be a little bit snobby in dual language and in world language and say things like, well, that's not appropriate Spanish, or that's not standard English, or that's not the level of French that we want our students to have. But we need to remember that actually all language is beautiful. And so whether the students bring a little bit of social and academic language, or a lot of both, or some of each, we need to remember and have conversations with kids that all language is beautiful, that all accents are beautiful. And the fact that every single one of us has an accent, but yet some accents have some, are seen as better accents than others. Like, those are the things that we need to be talking about. And then that regionalism piece is very important, because our job is not to say, no, that's not how you say it. Our job is to say, wow, that's how you say it at home. Let me add some academic language to your linguistic repertoire. And I just want you to know that there are students across the world that are really focusing on these three goals, including world language immersion programs. And so these three goals, I think, really capture everything that Fabrice and I are talking about. Don't you agree, Fabrice?
I agree, and I agree. And you bring back an old story. When I speak French, of course, and I spoke French at school with a northern accent. This was my regionalism, and that accent was not well considered, particularly when I went to college. And the professors were constantly picking on me because I spoke with this, weird, rough accent from the north. And obviously, I had, in order to survive, I had to eliminate that accent. But still, I remember, I felt, well, this is unfair. Why should I lose that part of me?
Exactly. And Fabrice, the thing is that every single one of us that's on this webinar has a big, thick, ugly accent that would annoy someone in the world. We just are so often too egocentric to realize it. But every single one of us has an accent somewhere. I had the same experience, Fabrice, with people telling me que mi español porque no lo estudié en España, o no lo estudié en Centroamérica, que mi español no es bello, pero mi español de Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, El Paso, Texas es hermosísimo. And so just having those conversations with our emergent bilingual students, I think is of the utmost importance. And Fabrice,
you speak Spanish beautifully.
Ay, gracias. Fue mi mamá me lo enseñó. And then I took it in school too, but my mom set that foundation. So.
Very good. Let's move on. There's something about what being bilingual is not, because I keep hearing people with these old ideas that, if you're bilingual, you're a handicap. Your vocabulary will be slowed down, or your IQ will be limited. These are just things that are not true and that you keep hearing. Being bilingual is not something superfluous. It's something that is to be cherished. It's something that is to be encouraged. It is not a taboo. If you're coming from a different country, you should not have to hide your language. You should not have to hide your accent. This is something that we should all, as educators, keep on repeating over and over and over again. And one more thing, being bilingual is not a privilege. You don't have to spend $30,000, $40,000 a year to become bilingual. This should be in every public school. Being bilingual is the new norm, and it must start with our youngest citizen, our global citizens of the world. Now, this is a vision that I've shared in several talks, and Jose, please, share your views as well on this, because I think that together we need to join forces in a viable 21st century approach, which has, puts our linguistic heritage at the center. We should invest in our linguistic heritages, because this is good for our societies, this is good for our communities, this is good for our schools, and this also helps us raise new generations of multilingual citizens of the world. The idea behind this vision is that parents should be at the center of this. Multilingualism, dual language programs will succeed and flourish in this country and other places if parents take on a leadership role in creating, implementing those programs. And it's by empowering parents that we will succeed.
Fabrice, yeah, I wanted to add one thing, Fabrice, because something that you said actually just brought something to my mind. I was in another state. I live in the DC area, but I was serving in another state several months ago, and I was in a dual language serving a dual language program. And the principal, who's a phenomenal guy and just a wonderful gentleman, said something, though, that started a lot of discussion. The students were making cross-linguistic connections between English and Spanish. It happened to be a Spanish-English, English-Spanish dual language program. And he said, the only thing that I'm worried about is that there doesn't seem to be enough rigor in the first grade classroom, because the kids were making connections between Spanish and English. So actually using both languages, talking about syntax, talking about cognates. And so I had to clarify and say, you know, I don't know of any 6-year-old in a traditional monolingual first grade classroom that is learning how to read, but is also making is engaging in contrastive analysis between two of the major superpower languages, English and Spanish. And so once we engaged in a dialogue, he realized that, okay, the kids are not engaging in low rigor work. It's that they're actually making connections between the two languages to improve both. And so that's something that was very, very telling, that even those of us that have the best intentions and are leading these programs need to continue to grow, because it's the kind of subtractive thinking that really could impede the progress of a dual language program. No se te hace, Fabrice?
Muy bien.
¿Verdad que sí? Like, I'm sure that you've seen it as well, as you've served in dual language programs, that administrator is so very important to really get that additive ideology at the forefront of everything.
Yes, and what drives me crazy is finding administrators who just won't believe in this and not support initiatives coming from parents or other educators. And that can't go on in our century. This has to be eliminated somehow. We need a revolution for this, a bilingual revolution.
Claro que sí. Just you would be very proud, Fabrice. Just yesterday, I facilitated a parent meeting here in the DC area, and the parents were learning about how language is added and about interdependence hypotheses and translanguaging and how the research has shifted. And the meeting was facilitated in both English and Spanish. And it was amazing to see our Spanish-speaking parents, who often don't have access to the information that is shared in most meetings, because most meetings are held in English in the United States, just to see them take ownership of their children's learning and of the choices that they've made in order to ensure that the children are bilingual and biliterate. It was kind of amazing. It was fantastic. One of the things that I would say to our webinar participants is, when was the last time that your school hosted a PTO or a parent meeting completely in a language not English? Why not have the English-speaking parents put on the headphones and receive translation from someone when the meeting is in Spanish or German or French or Chinese? Because that definitely sends a message of equity and elevates both program languages. And that brings us right into the guiding principles. So Fabrice knows that the guiding principles is one of the resources that is used most widely around the world to implement dual language programming, as well as continuously improve existing programs. And I was blessed because having been a dual language school principal in Texas, I actually used the 2nd edition of the guiding principles for dual language education to begin a new dual language program as the founding school principal. And I never in my wildest dreams imagined that one day I would be guiding the work at the Center for Applied Linguistics, and that I would be one of the authors of the 3rd edition. But this is the way that America works when doors are open and access is created. And so I'm one of the co-authors, and I'm so very proud of the work of the guiding principles, because what it does is it really creates a framework for anyone seeking to implement or improve a world language or a dual language program. And it gives you rubrics and the latest research and the latest recommendations all in one resource. And it is available free of charge if you go to the link that is on the slide at this moment. Would you change to the next one? I just wanted to share, because I know that Fabrice talks about all of these things as well. And so I wanted to let you know that these are the 7 things that really should be a part of any world language immersion, or dual language program. And so for each one of these 7 strands in this one resource, if you had questions about instruction in a biliteracy, a bilingual program, dual language, world language program, you would go to strand number 3, and there are 5 to 7 pages with the latest literature review as of November 2017. And then it actually offers rubrics so that as a school, you can plan for initial implementation, but then also go back periodically and take a look at those rubrics and identify places where you are at minimal, partial, full, or exemplary, and be able to continuously move in the right direction as we serve the students in dual language and world language immersion programs. And obviously strand number 6, Fabrice, yo sé que le va a gustar, la familia y la comunidad. Ya sabe que teníamos que incluirlo.
Más importante, sí, sí, sí.
Sumamente importante. And I was blessed to work on that strand specifically. Each of the authors, we tackled different strands. And so I can tell you that the family and community piece in the guiding principles is all about creating access so that every single parent is able to ensure that their child, from whatever language background, whatever socioeconomic status they come from, that they have access to what Fabrice is telling us that we all need to do, which is that we need to prepare our kids for a multilingual world. I just shared this, but it includes the guiding principles for dual language education, includes the lit reviews, which I mentioned for each one of the 7 strands, the updated rubrics, and then there are some blank rubric templates that you can use for self-reflection. And if ever you have a question about this to the webinar participants, you have a new friend that that knows this document really well. Your friend's name is me, and so you would just have to email me or tweet me, and I will engage and offer whatever information you need in terms of how to use the document. Oh, one last thing that I forgot, Fabrice. I just wanted to mention, Fabrice, when we authored the guiding principles for dual language education, the 3rd edition, I just wanted to let you and everyone know that we actually knew that this document would be used for world language immersion programs as well, and just wanted to make sure that you understood that it was created, understanding that this would be an umbrella for all of these types of programs, and that includes goal number 3, sociocultural competence, so that definitely should be a part of that world language program as well.
What I like about this is that a school principal does not have to reinvent the wheel. Everything is in there, and you hear it very often. You know, a lot of principals will not get on board with an initiative like this just because they don't know, or they don't know enough about it, and they're not confident in it. But this gives them the answers right away.
Exactly. Está diciendo hashtag es la true.
So let's go into some of the examples. I decided I would show a few, and then Jose has a few as well, a few success stories. Sometimes we need to, hear from them. This is one in Brooklyn, PSIS 30, which started New York City's only Arabic dual language program. And the children now, they start in kindergarten and go all the way to 8th grade, learning in both languages, sharing their classrooms with Arabic speakers and non-Arabic speakers. And everyone's learning from, of course, from the teachers, but also from each other. They understand each other's culture more. They respect each other's cultures and values. They are becoming better citizens of our world just by the fact that together they're learning this language. They're learning English as well at the same time. This for me, coming from France, where we have about 5 million Arabic speakers or descendants from Arabic-speaking countries, we don't have any of those programs. None of the schools, none of the public schools offer these programs, and I keep wondering why. Why should we not encourage our Arabic heritage speakers to preserve and develop their language skills. It's such a waste, such squander of linguistic skills that this has an impact not only on their identity, but also how they will grow up later, becoming young adults. Other examples coming from parents are very critical. This is from the principal of PSIS 30, who decided to share this quote with us because she says that it is not just a program for Arabic speakers. A lot of families, non-Arabic speaking families, are banging at the door to get in the program. This is in Brooklyn. This is with a public school. This is definitely building bridges and not walls. Jose.
Awesome. Yeah, I love your little last statement there, Fabrice. It's about building bridges, not walls. Mira, mira. So I know that all of you are in the state of New York, but I wanted to share some examples from outside of New York and in other states as well, because I think that it's important that we really make those connections with people from around the country and also around the world. And so I wanted you to meet one of my friends and colleagues. His name is Larry Levan, and he is the school principal at the Dalton School of Hong Kong. And I asked him, like, what are some of the things that really are functioning and working as you implement dual language programming? And so he really talked about student ownership of the learning. And so you can read some of the things that he said there. But one of the things that really strikes me about this school and that aligns with everything that Fabrice talks about in the bilingual revolution and is also at the core of the guiding principles for dual language education is the fact that students have to own their identity, have to own their language and languages, have to own their learning. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen in classrooms. I love that the students there proclaim, I am not led, I lead, which is kind of phenomenal. And I am not a Chinese speaker, but I know dual language really well. And one of the things that's been really helpful at Dalton School of Hong Kong is that they have followed the guiding principles for dual language prior to an initial implementation of the program, which has really ensured that the teachers were well prepared to meet the needs of these students. And Fabrice, you're going to love this. This is the only school, the only dual language, world language immersion school that I know of in the world that is implementing 50-50 dual language programming with 2-year-olds. You heard me right. 2-year-olds. And not only are they implementing with 2-year-olds, which in the States, I do know of programs that are implementing with 3- and 4-year-olds, but these 2-year-olds can talk about their content and language objectives. They know that they listen, speak, read, write, and make cross-linguistic connections, and they are actively communicating with one another. It is the most phenomenal thing. So,
amazing.
Isn't it great? So if ever,
amazing.
Yeah, if ever you want to connect with any of these friends that Fabrice and I are sharing information about, please just reach out to us. And I think I have one other example on the next slide of this is you.
Let's go to the Japanese story because this cracks me up. A few years ago, 5 mothers came. They came to see me, and we talked about this idea they had this crazy idea. They wanted to create New York City's first Japanese dual language program. And you had 2 Japanese moms, one was Taiwanese, one was Korean, one was from China. And there's something to be said about the power of mothers, mamas con poder, because they took this idea, put down a roadmap, and within 6 months, they found, let me turn this off. They found a school in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And Bushwick, Brooklyn is not Japanese. Bushwick, Brooklyn is predominantly Puerto Rican. But yet they found this principal, Sandy Noyola. And Sandy Noyola is not Japanese. She's from Puerto Rico. And Sandy said, well, if I could create a Japanese English dual language program in my school, well, children from Spanish-speaking families, Japanese-speaking families, monolingual English-speaking families could come together and learn these two languages in a public school, then this will make my day. And guess what? This has happened. This program is flourishing, and they even received the visit of Japan's first lady a few years ago, and she gave a check of $30,000 to the school to support the program. So these are incredible stories, and these are possible things happening right now.
And Fabrice,
if I can jump in, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I had a question from one of our attendees. Actually, it's a two-part question. In your experience, what types of schools or districts offer dual language immersion programs? And is it possible to create a program in a smaller district, in a suburb, or in a smaller town?
Sure. So I can take a stab at it, and then you can jump in, Fabrice. There's really not like one set of characteristics that would define what a school or what a school district looks like to implement a dual language program. I think that Fabrice and I both would tell you that if the will is there, then it will happen. I mean, look at this Japanese dual language program. It really was about two mothers ensuring that it happened. I can tell you that if the district is willing and ready to support, it does make the journey a lot easier, because there are many things that need to be considered when implementing a dual language program. But I have schools that I serve that are 200 students or less, as well as huge urban school districts that have many, many schools and that are implementing district-wide with hundreds of thousands of students enrolled in these dual language programs. So it really is about wanting to make this happen for the students, and the fact that the leadership and the parents and the community understand that it's what's best for students.
When I first moved to the US 20 years ago, I was in Boston, and I visited this French immersion program in this town called Milton, Massachusetts. It's about 20 minutes outside of Boston. And Milton does not have a French-speaking population. It's mostly Irish, Italian. But they created this French immersion program over 30 years ago, and starting with the elementary schools, middle schools, and even the high school, so much so that over 1,000 children in this small town outside of Boston are getting fully bilingual, biliterate, multicultural, and this is happening in a public school again. There are so many stories, so many examples that it's simply, why don't we do this everywhere? Why can't we have these programs in every school, in every country as well? There's another story that I wanted to share with you, is the High School for Dual Language and Asian Studies, which is a high school. And this is one of the rare examples of a high school with a successful dual language program. And it was not a piece of cake to initiate. The principal had to struggle the first couple of years to get parents interested, and yet within a few years the school became one of the top high schools in the United States. I'm just showing the 2018 rankings right here, but it was I think 3 years ago they were ranked number 9 in the US, a high school from New York City with a Chinese program. On one side you have Chinese speakers, on the other you have beginners, total beginners, who become fluent very quickly. And this for me is clear. Our programs have to run from preschool all the way to high school and even college. This is another thing that we must think about, is what will happen throughout this continuum, and can this go on all the way to college.
And Fabrice, I did want to mention that in the guiding principles, the pre-K-12 articulation is explicitly the recommendation. And so you're absolutely right. All of the latest research shows that if we are able to implement pre-K or K-12, that it does make a huge difference in the ability of students to really achieve the 3 goals of dual language.
Thank you, Jose. The other example is closer for me, because this is where everything began in New York City with the French community. There was a survey of how many French kids or French-speaking kids, or even kids living in French-speaking homes there were in New York City. We counted over 22,000 children in New York City alone who live in homes where French is spoken. So, I know, just to count these numbers, that's enough to create 25 programs. But then, because it's a dual language programs, you double that number. The bottom line really is we need more schools. We need more schools like this. We need to have them in every borough, in every city. In New York City, for instance, most of those Francophones, the French speakers, they don't live in Manhattan. They are in the Bronx, and they don't come from France. They come from French-speaking African countries for the most part. Why can't we have many programs in the Bronx, for instance? These are questions that I keep asking, and I keep pushing for. For this, we need some money, obviously. We need some support from the DOE. We need some support from communities, the communities at large. It takes a village to create a dual language program. But we need also to talk to the parents and convince them, tell them, explain to them that this can be done. This is what other communities have done. Here is an example of a German dual language program, which was initiated by one mother one day who talked to another mother, and in a matter of a few weeks, she created this initiative to have, New York City's first German dual language program, where German heritage families, German speakers, would share the same classroom as non-German speakers. This is, Jose, back to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to share the story of Oyster Adams. Oyster Adams is actually one of the most famous bilingual schools in the world. It's located here in the Washington, D.C. area. And this is Mayra Cruz, the principal. And one of the reasons why I wanted to share this example is because I feel like a lot of the schools in New York State really would benefit, and also the students at Oyster Adams would benefit from connecting with some of the students in Spanish, English, Spanish programs in New York State, because some of the needs are similar. In this case, really it was about serving a community that was mostly Latino, as Fabrice has mentioned. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it was the case. But the other thing that I love about what's being done at Oyster Adams is, even though they've been a part of many seminal research studies, they continuously strive to improve. And so DCPS and this principal in particular they continue to seek out the latest research and the latest biliteracy instructional practices, because as Fabrice can tell you, the implementation of a dual language program is difficult, but then once that happens, then we also need to focus on biliteracy instructional practices that are aligned with the latest research. And this continues to be a pattern, but the idea that student discourse, student ownership is really, really important. I love that at Oyster Adams, really they ask each other who grappled with the content more. Was it the students or was it the teachers? And also, the idea that if students don't have an opportunity and a space that is created to manipulate the language of instruction at that moment, then it doesn't happen. Así es que aprenderlo al usarlo es algo sumamente importante. Fabrice, I don't know if you've ever visited Oyster Adams, but if ever you're interested, I'm really close with this principal. I think that you would love visiting if you've not had a chance to visit there.
Oh, thank you. I would love that. I'll be in Washington for ACTFL, so perhaps we could, organize a visit.
Sí, exactamente. And if any of the participants need a hookup, just let me know, and I can facilitate an email introduction as well.
So we have a few more minutes to go through a number of slides. I'll pass quickly, but you get my story, particularly about the bridges. There's a nice bridge for you. This is the Korean families in Brooklyn trying to create a bridge. Not only a bridge for their families between the mothers and their husbands, who don't speak Korean, but also a bridge between communities and cultures. The Greeks, and I was again yesterday with Chancellor Carranza discussing the future of dual language education, and a group of Greek parents, ask questions about why are we not creating a Greek dual language program in Astoria, where there are thousands of Greek speakers and Greek learners. And their initiative is very interesting to follow. You'll find more information about this group on Facebook. And they will succeed. They will succeed in creating New York City's first Greek dual language program.
This is just a school that I wanted to highlight. It's one of the schools that really has taken that third goal, and they're working deeply with it, because most of us as adults are afraid to talk about racism, are afraid to talk about homophobia, are afraid to talk about religion, are afraid to talk about physical ability and mental health and sexual identity, all of these things that really should be talked about. And so in a dual language program, if we're truly focusing on that third goal, sociocultural competence, then we can really have an impact when helping students to really be kind. And really, we need to go beyond tolerance. Like, I love the Teaching Tolerance website, but I hate the idea of teaching tolerance. Kids and families don't need to be tolerated. They need to be cherished and valued and respected. And so this is one of the schools that really has taken on that third goal, and it's driving everything that they're doing, really giving ownership to the parents in the community, but more specifically, giving ownership of that sociocultural competence piece to the students. And just as a reminder, sociocultural competence is about seeing the similarities and the differences in each other, but seeing the differences as opportunities to connect rather than obstacles to overcome. And what an amazing lesson for students to take away from the dual language and world language immersion programs that they participate in, if this were actually a focus.
I have a question, if I could just jump in. One of our attendees is asking, could you talk about recommended or suggested teacher training paths for dual or immersion language programs?
Sure. So one of the things that definitely should happen before a program is implemented is that the entire community really should understand the basics of dual language programming. That includes the 3 goals. What are some of the biliteracy strategies that are going to be utilized? It's important that this happens, and if it doesn't happen prior to the implementation, that it happens quickly thereafter, because what ends up happening is that sometimes we'll decide that a school is going to be dual language, but if the teachers don't understand what that fully means, then it becomes an obstacle that really can be difficult to overcome. Additionally, there's a lot of new professional learning in terms of biliteracy instructional practices. For example, many of us that have been around for a while, we served in bilingual programs or in traditional world language programs, and things have changed a lot in terms of the instruction that is facilitated. I know that in bilingual programming, for the longest time, we separated languages to extremes, and we even lied sometimes to kids if we were bilingual and biliterate, and we acted as if we didn't speak the other partner language, which in retrospect doesn't make any sense. And so cross-linguistic connections, the use of one language to support the other, is something that would be imperative in any dual language program, whether it's Arabic English, whether it's Chinese English, Japanese English, Spanish English, like those pieces are extremely important. Don't you think, Fabrice?
Extremely important. And I think universities are now getting on board as well. You find more and more masters in bilingual education and other initiatives like that. The Embassy of France, for instance, has just created a summer program for teachers of dual language and immersion programs, so that they can share experiences and lessons learned. And that's something I wish could be multiplied, and definitely is crucial. Finding qualified teachers is crucial. Finding enough teachers is crucial, but keeping training and professionally developed is also crucial. Let's move on very quickly, because I think we're running out of time. Just briefly, this is the center that I just founded, just to get parents interested and also coached and trained about what dual language education is and what steps they should take. I'm showing this because I wanted to give a gift to our audience. I'll share, courtesy of CALIC, courtesy of the center. I'll share my book with you later. This is what we tell parents. You need to follow 3 steps, 3 major phases. You need a community outreach in your plan, in your roadmap, and create a base of interested families. Recruit them everywhere in your community, whether it's in churches, on playground, cultural centers, in a mosque. You need to create a base of interested families. And then from then on, you move to finding a school and an interested principal. That takes some time, that takes some diplomacy as well. And finally, when you get the okay from the school principal, your job does not stop there. You need to continue supporting that principal in that school and providing all the support you can. So these are the things that CALIC is trying to do, is bring that roadmap, translate it in many, many languages so that more communities can get served.
We can move from this one. More than anything, I just wanted to share just another example. This is Mundo Verde School, also here in DC, but they just talked about, they really have focused on what Fabrice just mentioned, that roadmap, because I think that the 3 steps that Fabrice shares with us are extremely important. And then so much more also comes after that, because then we really need to tackle the 7 strands. And how is it that we're going to focus on the program structure? What is our curriculum going to look like? Is there a scope and sequence that's actually in place? What is instruction going to look like? Who's going to support that instruction in 2 languages? How are we going to recruit teachers and community? So just another example of some of the work that's being out there that I think would be really important to make connections to those of you that are serving in the state of New York.
The Bilingual Revolution is a book. It's also a resource online. This is where we post the videos from parents, educators, everyone's putting their 2 cents, what it is to create a great dual language program, what are the steps to follow. Even students share what it means for them to be bilingual, multilingual. And this is something free and accessible, and I'll share with you the address is thebilingualrevolution.info.
Just the last thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly, because we don't have time, is I've already talked about the cross-linguistic connections, but I wanted to remind us that you don't have to speak the partner language to be an amazing dual language educator and advocate. You could be monolingual, you could be bilingual, you could be multilingual. It doesn't matter how many languages one speaks in order to truly advocate for dual language programming if your heart is in the right place. Because at the end of the day, if we speak heart, then everyone will understand, and that's what's important. This is Clarissa from China, and she is not Chinese, but leads a fantastic, wonderful Chinese-English dual language program.
So here comes the gift. You can download the Bilingual Revolution for free using this code, CALIC, if you log on tbr-books.org. Today, you can download all these ebooks for free, and then it's available in French, English, German, Russian. It's coming in Arabic, Italian, Polish, Chinese, and many more languages. So this, please take down the code and download this book for free and share it with your parents and communities.
Just a reminder, my 2 books, in terms of my testimonial, are being released actually next week at the CABE conference, and it really talks about my entry into the school system and my name actually being changed from Jose to Joe by my 1st grade teacher, because she wanted me to be more American. And so that part of my testimonial will be a part of this book.
So in conclusion, and we'll take question after that, being bilingual at home, yes, you can always maintain your language at home and help your children to become bilingual, multilingual. And these are things that parents need to understand and seize the opportunity of bilingualism and multilingualism to connect with their children and have their children connect with their parents and grandparents and their friends. This is the best way to creating tolerance, respect, mutual understanding among our families, among our communities, and in our country. So for Jose and Jose, please come in, the dual language education, you understand, is obviously about equity and social justice. And the goals of dual language are, as we discussed, are multiple, but we want a society that welcomes multilinguals, and we want a society that fosters multilingualism. And again, to go back to Greg Roberts' quote, monolingualism is not acceptable. Monolingualism is the illiteracy of the 21st century. Jose, what do you think?
I think that that he's right on target, and I just wanted to point out that Fabrice and I come from very different worlds, but as you can tell, we really have the same vision, and that vision is that every child deserves the opportunity to be bilingual, biliterate, to have achievement at grade level in both program languages, and even more importantly, to be a kind and good human being that sees others with pride and with joy and in an additive fashion.
So this is us.
Ay, mira, we're so cute, Fabrice.
Your picture is better.
We just wanted to close with our childhood pictures. This is me as an English learner. I actually did not speak Spanish. I did not speak English, excuse me, as I entered the US school system. And Fabrice is looking super handsome as well.
Well, this is me with a northern accent that soon, was demolished. But here, happy to be able to communicate in French, in English, in Spanish today. Anyway, so I think we have a few questions coming.
We do have a couple of questions, and first of all, thank you both so much. And I think what you were talking about with kindness and giving all of our children the ability and the privilege of learning more languages, I think that is something that really speaks to some of our smaller towns as well. And that was one of the questions that came in. How do we do that? How do we support that? And how do we keep advocating in the smaller towns? And I think you gave us some great ideas for that. As well, we had a question for you, Fabrice, that was asking that you mentioned areas of France that could easily benefit from dual language programs with Arabic. The attendee is asking, have you done any work advocating for these types of programs in France, or has your work been entirely here in the United States?
So I was invited last October to l'Assemblée nationale. So this is a French Congress. And I was given the floor and shared the information about la révolution bilingue, because this is something that I believe would be very, very beneficial to my country. And things are changing. Obviously, Brexit has an impact on the way bilingual education is being built today in Europe. Brexit means a lot more people leaving the UK and trying to look for a new home, and that means where will I find a bilingual school for my children? So this is pushing leaders to create more strategies and implement more dual language programs. And I'm hoping that we see more of these programs coming in France.
That's great. Thank you. And we have one last question that, yes, we will be giving the slides to this presentation that will be coming up. And so on that note, we're going to throw it back to John Carlino at headquarters to give us the final wrap up. But thank you both, gentlemen, for this incredible presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabrice and Jose, for that very informative presentation. And thank you, Beth, for moderating. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it has been recorded, and the recording will be made available on request within a few days. Please watch your email for details on that and regarding your proof of attendance. Please wait for that email and just hit reply to request your certificate. Please continue the discussion on today's webinar via Twitter by following the hashtag NYSAChat, NYSACHAT. Jose and Fabrice will be watching that as well, so if you have any further questions for them, you can post them there. This month we'll be having a slow chat, and to participate in this kind of chat, simply follow @Neisefeld and respond to the questions and responses throughout the entire week at your convenience. You can also post your own questions about today's webinar for others to answer. grow your professional learning network. You can post your own questions at any time. At NYSAFELT, we'll post a series of questions starting tomorrow morning. If you have any questions after today, please email us and someone will get back to you as soon as possible. On behalf of the NYSAFELT Board of Directors, thank you for attending this evening's webinar. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Right.